Apostolic tradition.
Hi, welcome to Apostolic Tradition. We're here with Denis Selen, the Ubi Petrus mastermind who has been doing apologetics, particularly between comparing the Orthodox tradition with the Roman Catholic tradition, and also some other things as well you've done over the years. But we're talking about some of those distinctions today, getting deeper into some of these questions. Not all of them have been answered, particularly by your channel. These are things that somewhat are fresh, I think, in your discussions. But I don't think they've been dealt with anywhere. I think some of these questions have just been ignored.
Yeah.
In the at least the YouTube sphere.
Or they're buried so deep you're not going to find them.
Right. So I think in general, one of the big questions that people have is, I think they want to know what aspects of Orthodox Christianity stand out. What makes Orthodoxy obviously the real contender when we think, who is the Apostolic Church? Who can trace back their lineage? What makes the Orthodox Church the real claimant to being the Church of the Apostles of the New Testament and so forth?
Well, as opposed to, say, like the Nestorian Church or the Monophysites or Catholicism,
Right,
or Anglicanism, what would make it more apostolic? And the answer is that the further we go back in history, we see certain practices, and it's like an onion. You slowly peel away different communions. And for me, if you read like Hippolytus's work, he's second century or third
200s,
late second century, early third century. Mm-hmm. You see these same things that would label it apostolic. Mm-hmm. But from there, what separates, say, like the Oriental Communion and the Nestorian Communion, you actually have to understand theology at that point. You have to understand Christology. Mm-hmm. What separates it from Catholicism, I would say, in terms of just practice, is that we still commune children. We give confirmation, we baptize, confirm, and commune people mm-hmm. right away. And that was how it was done, that we're willing to do that with children even. You as a scholar in patristics and mm-hmm. you're highly familiar with the Bible, that when St. Paul says, I baptized this whole house, what did household mean in the ancient world?
Right.
It didn't mean everyone. It didn't mean mom and dad.
Right. It was the paterfamilias set the standard, and if he's the one being received in, like Cornelius, that means his household's coming in with him,
including the slaves.
Yeah.
And possibly even the clients,
mm-hmm.
so to say. I mean, this was a lot of people. This mm-hmm. was, we baptized 120 people. None of them were below the age of reason.
Are you familiar with the commission? So in the late 80s, I think it was, the Vatican had this, the commission that looks at initiation rites, mm-hmm. like baptism and confirmation, did an official study that concluded that the way the Orthodox do it is the correct way, the ancient way of East and West, of receiving, how baptism was done, how children were communed as infants, how, the confirmation was done immediately with, in the early church, and that these developed differently in the West over time.
Correct.
So that being said, are these deal breakers, and why? Like, why this? Just because it's older, why is it better that the Orthodox do it this way? Not just that, because you could say antiquity is important. I guess you go back to like Saint Vincent of Laurent, his like definition of what is tradition is antiquity is part of it. Definitely, like how old something is makes a difference. But he says that's not the only factor, and something can be old and be not correct, possibly. So why would you say that that the way that we do it, and even it seems the Vatican seems to agree with us that in theory on that, but why is it more correct?
Well, I mean, if it's how the apostles did it, who are you to say it's wrong?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, this is how it was done. These are, Saint Irenaeus of Lyon and his Against Heresies, he talks about, how do we know what the truth is? And the bishop is, he was ordained by someone or consecrated by someone who was consecrated by someone all the way back to the apostles themselves. And you see the uniformity in the churches. And that, over time, before the imperial model, how is it that all these churches were keeping roughly the same faith?
Right.
And roughly the same practices? I mean, it's something that spread organically. There was no top-down institution that could control all of it. How is it that churches in Syria were doing it the same way as churches in Britain, as churches in Carthage, as churches in, along the Danube?
Right. Yeah.
Up into the Caucasus is how they were doing it. So that's one way. The other is that we have an episcopal government, and that's how the church worked. Every historian there is goes, yeah, it's very clear. Even the ones who posit an early development of the papacy, they typically don't place it earlier than, say, the mid 400s. Even those who, and I don't agree with that, but I place it much later than that. But it's that you have this episcopal government very early on. You have independent churches that are in communion with one another. Each bishop is the high priest at the temple. Each diocese is the temple. Each altar is the altar at that temple, and you can only make sacrifices at that altar. Well, the church is a collection of temples. The bishop is the true priest. That's, you in your case, you are a priest, but you are someone whom the bishop has chosen.
Right. I'm like a right hand of the bishop. Yeah.
There you go. You're an extension of, the bishop lends his priesthood to the priest. He lends his priesthood to the deacon, for our benefit, but he is the true priest. He's a true high priest. And so when you look at ecclesiology like that the church is a collection of the temple, right? But in, the temple, or I should say the church is a collection of temples, each one the true temple, that come together in love, in communion, The St. Ignatius of Antioch was his ecclesiology. It's, okay, look, what is a church? It's the bishop surrounded by his presbyters, the deacons, the laity celebrating the Eucharist. That's the fullness of the church right there. Right.
Are you familiar with the research? There's it's a little bit newer in the last 20 years. There's a theory that of all the cities in the ancient world, Rome perhaps did not have a mono-episcopacy up until the time of St. Hippolytus. Like, the theory is that there's some evidence that shows that there were a couple of different competing communities. For example, there was the Greek quarter had its own, but basically they were kind of the biggest group, and then you had some other groups in Rome, and then St. Hippolytus was the one who kind of united them all together as one group under one bishop, and that was an anomaly the first 200 years in Rome.
I'm not familiar with. Okay, I have heard that theory. I have not read the scholarship on it.
Yeah, it's debated, but it's interesting that that's possibly the case, that there was, that the lineage that Saint Irenaeus is referencing perhaps was just of the Greek-speaking one, which was the largest one.
It's very likely.
Yeah,
the liturgy was done in Rome until early 200s. The liturgy was done in Greek. So that would make sense. I mean, that doesn't mean that those other bishops that were not from the Greek community were not legitimate bishops. It just means they weren't, the bishop. And when you think about it, you're going to have a lot of bishops in a city the size of Rome. At the time of Augustus, it was about 1 million people. By the mid 200s, it was down to 500,000.
Wow, yeah, that's huge.
It was a real Detroit situation where it went downhill. But still, even with 500,000, even with 100,000, you're going to need multiple bishops. If nothing else, you're going to need a bishop for each district. And that's how, now in the city of Rome, you have they call them auxiliary bishops, but they're really for separate districts. You have to. So
what other markers can you think of? Any others that point to the Eastern Orthodox Church being the real inheritors of?
Well, there's how we administer sacraments. There's the fact that we have a synodal government. There's the fact that we have a very... we associate Judaism with modern rabbinic Judaism. Realistically, modern rabbinic Judaism is a totally different religion from from Israelite religion.
Right, and even from Second Temple Judaism, and
Yeah, I mean, Israelite religion being, Temple Judaism. Whether, I mean, I know there's scholars differentiate between First Temple, Second Temple, but just assuming Israelite religion would be, a Temple Judaism, you see how the services were done there, what was important there, and it's like, I mean, I can't remember her name. She's the one who wrote The Great Angel. She did a lot of work. It's called
Margaret Barker.
Yeah, Margaret Barker. And she said, when I went into an Orthodox church, I said, well, this is just temple worship right here.
Right.
This is what it is.
She's interesting. I've read quite a bit of her work over the years.
Yeah, the Great Angel is a pretty dense book, but we have that as well. We have temple worship. We have a synodal government of the church, episcopal government. We have the way that we administer the sacraments. I mean, that's really all the church is. It's worship, it's sacraments. I would say also in our disciplines themselves, the way that we still have heavy amounts of fasting. And again, if you want to differentiate between us and say the Oriental Communion or, the Nestorians, or rather Assyrians, you have to get into like Christology per se, and that's where you then, it becomes different. But vis-a-vis traditionally Western churches, we do have the older way of doing things.
Right.
And ultimately, the way the apostles do things is the older way. It's the oldest way, and why would you differentiate from that? Why would you leave that? Now, some would say, well, you have situations, pastoral situations that call for it. It's like what? I mean, the human condition is the human condition. You have updates in language, sure, like terminology. You have to explain things to people who have different paradigms and new ways, but how should that affect how the sacraments are performed or confected?
Right.
Speaking of using Latin language, how sacraments are confected, right? Yeah. But why should that change how sacraments are confected? How should that change the actual liturgy itself? It's biblical. The Bible is the Bible.
Right. What do you think about in the Roman Catholic Church attempts to kind of revert to earlier concepts or earlier traditions? For example, it hasn't quite caught on, but there are numerous churches that are trying to do the sacrament of the Eucharist under both kinds, so to speak, right, under the body and the blood, which hasn't been done for centuries, and they're trying to bring it back in certain places. As
of late, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that's a hopeful sign in any way that they're moving more towards the apostolic tradition by doing things like that?
I think a lot of this is just sort of fetishizing, wouldn't that be interesting? I think a lot of it is just that on their part.
So it won't lead to like a reapprehension, you could say, of like the apostolic way.
No, I mean, maybe in that one way, sure, but overall, like, I think it's sort of like how they put one like a Byzantine icon in the church. Isn't that nice?
Right.
Okay. By the way, we also need to have the stole made by the 3rd grade class. Okay, and we don't want our like 65-year-old women with really short hair feeling left out, so we'll make them Eucharistic ministers. It's just they're trying to reach everyone, and it's like, no, you gotta focus on the people who are actually worthwhile to focus on. You can't just throw your pearls before swine.
Right, and the church has to be the one to set standards. I mean, I remember somebody saying to me one time, well, the church shouldn't judge. I said, if anyone has the right to judge, both biblically and traditionally speaking, it would be the church, right? The church actually is the one who should be telling us what God's standards are. It's.
I love that. Like, well, it says don't judge unless you want to be judged in the same manner that you have judged. And yeah, if I were, living some orgy-fueled life, I'd want someone to be like, you're going to burn in hell for that. I'd want someone to tell me, like, this is not right. This is completely unacceptable.
Right.
I mean, that's the loving thing to do. And we always make judgments about people in ways that are very good. We have to decide whether they're safe or not based on the information that we're given.
Right.
We have to look at situations and be like, what was that person's motivation? Therefore...
Trust but verify,
Yeah, trust. Well, not even trust, just verify.
Yeah.
And So don't judge. It's like, that's not what it says.
Well, Christ says, judge a righteous judgment, not just according to the external criteria. In other words, you have to know the whole picture. You have to know what's really happening, not just draw hasty conclusions.
And you can only make judgments based on what you know. Mm-hmm. And if you make them, and I'm convinced, if you make judgments off of everything that you can gather, and in good faith, mm-hmm. and with the intention of keeping people safe or restoring the situation to what it should be, mm-hmm. God would not hold that against you, because you're doing your duty to your fellow man.
Well, and we like to separate out in English, like we talk in a positive way, and we say discern. Yeah. It's the same word in Greek.
It's the same, yeah.
It's the same word in Greek as to judge. It's just that sometimes we like to translate it as discern to make it sound like it's a wise thing, as compared to judging being a bad thing.
Yeah,
it's the same word.
We'll get the SJWs on this one. If we use discern, it's like, no, just say judge. Just stick it to them. I mean, I know it sounds like I actually do rag on the Catholic Church a fair amount because people ask me about it, but mm-hmm. The situation there, like, no one is as hard on the Catholic Church as the people in the Catholic Church. Mm. And the stuff that I'm saying about it is tame compared to what they're saying about it. It's very sad seeing the Catholic Church go down this route, because, again, going back to what I said earlier, if you have the Catholic Church fall, I mean, Western civilization is built around that. And right now we're watching as they just welcome in the hordes. Mm. I mean, literally.
Right.
I mean, literally welcoming in the barbarian hordes. This is not going to end well. Yeah. This is really not going to end well.
So I guess underlying all of this, there's definitely a different epistemology, right? There's a different way of arriving at conclusions happening in the Orthodox Church than in the modern Roman Catholic Church. And maybe part of that is, for example, how we view the fathers of the church. Like, first of all, how does the Orthodox Church look at the bulk of all these writings? Like, how do we interpret these writings? Mm-hmm. How do we obviously can't weight all the patristic writings on the same level. Mm-hmm. So how are we doing that versus what happened in the West? What happened in the Roman Catholic Church in the way that they read the fathers, interpret the fathers? Do they even read the fathers now, or are they still kind of just existing off of the fumes of how they were interpreted throughout the late medieval, and early modern era?
So if we're just talking about the common believer, I mean, it's hard to get people even to do like the daily readings once a week. Mm. And that's in any church, right?
Right.
I mean, we're talking about the more like established people, the regular church attendees. We're talking about the actual hierarchy.
Yeah. Clergy, professors at universities, people in administrative roles,
So I can tell you, I mean, we're very much steeped in the Eastern tradition. We'll even reach out to the Western tradition. And there's a lot there that's very good. Mm-hmm. Very, very amazing things. What I find, like a friend of mine, he went to the FSSP seminary for about a year and then ended up leaving. And he said, being a trad Catholic for, I think it was like 8-9 years, he said, when people talk about traditional Christian writings there, it's like the Council of Trent. It's Teresa of the Little Flower. Mm-hmm. It's Aquinas.
Right.
It's St. Augustine. It's rarely, we're going to read Maximus Confessor, St. Mm-hmm. Maximus. We'll read St. John of Damascus. We'll read St. Hippolytus. No. It's rarely that, which is ironic because the modern liturgy is based heavily off of the liturgy recorded by Hippolytus, or at least one of the Eucharistic prayers, if I recall correctly. But yeah, our way of reading the fathers is that, one, you read them. Mm-hmm. Okay. 2, they tend to be older. I find a lot of the stuff that, especially in the trad circles, like people get really into these weird prophecies from some of these just absolute like crackpot nuns, like the 1400s. I mean, you find some of that with us too, but it's it's more like, elder who's it from Skeet What's It said, whatever. But what do you have in mind when you ask that?
Well, I guess there's a different way of arriving at, I'm not quite sure what the current theological methodology even is in the Roman Catholic Church. I mean, we kind of we have a methodology. Right?
How would you define our methodology?
So certainly we give greater weight to conciliar statements like the ecumenical councils, obviously the ecumenical councils, and whether you refer to them as later ecumenical councils or provincial councils like the ones like the Palamite councils, things like that. These things hold the most weight. These are kind of compendiums of what many different fathers or theologians are saying, sometimes in that era or over time, like they're referring back to earlier fathers, things like that. So it's kind of it very much is conciliar in that way, right? Not just in councils, but in like church wide. Right. And when we're trying to figure something out for today, like a new issue arises, that's what we're doing. We're going back and seeing, first of all, is any aspect of this or the underlying concept dealt with through the voice of the church? And we kind of tend to rank, for example, a council first, and maybe after that, it's specific fathers who were much more outstanding than other fathers. We might put together like the Cappadocian, St. Athanasius, St. Maximus, like very important fathers.
St. John of Damascus.
St. John of Damascus, St. John Chrysostom, like specific saints who tended to be highly revered, considered extremely holy or wise in the history of the church.
I would say the Catholic Church, that would be their methodology. Mm-hmm. How it's actually acted out, though, is an entirely different story.
Okay. Tell me about how it actually works in real life, though.
Well, the answer is that they look at an ecumenical council as an advisory body to the Pope. Okay. That's effectively how it is. Mm-hmm. They would not phrase it that way, but they slip up. They go, the councils are to advise the Pope. Yeah. So our concept of synodality is the bishops gather together, they actually come to a consensus, they issue a statement, and then there it is. Okay. Yeah. The Roman Catholic concept of synodality is basically the bishops gather together, they advise the Pope, and then they sit there and watch as the Pope makes a decision. Mm-hmm. That's their concept of synodality. And that gets back to this idea of like in Gasser's Relatio, he talks about, the Pope, he has a moral obligation, not a juridical one. He has a moral obligation to seek whatever resources that he sees fit. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. So he has a carte blanche. Okay. And if he, God will just prevent him from making a bad decision. And it's like, I'm not following through with this one. There's not enough actual backups for that. We can barely get our bishops together to have like lunch. Mm-hmm. Okay. How hard is it going to be to get them to make a statement that is truly heretical? Right. Okay. So we're talking about likelihoods. Even the most well-attended ecumenical council was Chalcedon. And I know in the hagiographies it says 620 bishops. Okay, by the actual signature list, it was around 360. Okay, that was out of about 1,200 in the empire. Okay, that was the largest council of the ecumenical ones. Okay. All right, so let's say that council makes a decision, and then the rest of the other 2/3 of the bishops are like, "What? Excuse me, what did you say?" That council's not going to go through. You have each autocephalous church signs off on it. Mm-hmm. The patriarch is going to show that he accepts it. He's only going to accept it if he knows that his synod accepts it, because they can oust him. Mm.
Yeah, it takes a synod really to get rid of a patriarch.
Yeah, and it's the synods can do it though. Mm-hmm. It's just within my lifetime they've done it at Jerusalem. They did one they healed a schism in Bulgaria. Mm-hmm. That was actually a time when all the patriarchates came together and then handled it. I think it was in 1998. But within the Roman Catholic system, okay, so it says the Pope he has a moral obligation to consult all of the all of the sources that he thinks are pertinent. So maybe that's polling the bishops.
Yeah.
Maybe that's talking to a couple of eminent theologians. Maybe that's reading a pamphlet while he's on the toilet.
Yeah, it's really ambiguous, I suppose.
His moral obligation, okay, like, nowhere does it say that he has...
Or it could come from personal revelation. He could say, I had a personal revelation in a dream last night.
Yeah, it's just like, this is a really slippery slope.
And then what is, like, when a statement is made, say, so there is an issue, so maybe you can help me understand what really is the difference between, say, for example, an encyclical statement or the so-called ex cathedra is like, some people would say, oh, only an ex cathedra statement is binding on the conscience of the faithful. I've heard people say that.
Yeah, which statements are ex cathedra?
Yeah,
I'd love to know.
That's what I'd like to know. What actually is an ex cathedra statement?
Is Humanae Vitae, is that actually ex cathedra, or is that just an encyclical?
Right, exactly.
What about
I don't know.
What about Casti Connubii? Right, who knows? Who did he actually consult for Casti Connubii? Who knows? I can't find any information on it. I can tell you how he came to the conclusion on Humanae Vitae. He got together, so out of about 5,000 bishops, he selected, I want to say it was 17?
Okay. They're from the magisterium, they were cardinals or not?
Well, one of them was John Paul II, when he was cardinal, or was he a cardinal? Carol, I can never pronounce what his last name was, but he was pre-Pope John Paul II. And he asked them, what do you think about the birth control pill? And the majority of the bishops, I think it was 17, said it just looks like a continuation of the rhythm method. It looks like it should be fine. So out of 5,000 bishops, he chooses not even a dozen and a half to then make a decision. One bishop and a couple of priests then write to the Pope and go, we don't think the decision of the rest of this group of experts that you assembled is correct. And the Pope goes, I'm going with the couple of guys here. Okay, how is that really the Pope showing actual synodality? It's not. It's him choosing a handful of people and then just going with whatever he wants.
Right.
And at that point, whether he consults or not, he can really do whatever he wants. And there's nothing anyone can do about it. And you see this repeatedly in the modern Roman Catholic Church. Whether it's Benedict saying, yeah, sure, you can just have the Latin Mass. We're going to override all the bishops and you can do it. Whether it's Pope Francis going, I don't think that I think the local bishop should be allowed to decide. Now, some would say, well, he did consult the bishops on this. Okay, I'm sure there were some that were, very angry about it. But even in that case, it's the Pope still holding the levers of control.
Right.
It's like a North Korean election. It's just, it's a North Korean congressional meeting. It's just like, okay, we all know who has the real control anyway. There's that famous line from Pope Pius the IX who pushed through papal infallibility. He goes, I'm so excited for papal infallibility to be passed through that if the council wasn't going to pass it, I'd dissolve the council and proclaim it myself.
Wow.
It's like, oh wow, that's real papal minimalism. And I mean, that's reported by Father Klaus Schatz. He's the world's expert on the history of Vatican I, and he records that as authentic. So it's a conundrum that the Catholic Church is in, because they have to walk back on a number of dogmas, but I don't know at this point if it's a matter of these guys even believe in these dogmas or if they've just sort of spiritualized them away.
Well, that's kind of a problem in a lot of other confessions, like, well, obviously the Anglican Church is the one that comes to mind the most, where you had like Sprong and people who said the resurrection didn't happen, but he's the Archbishop.
That's a generous description of Anglicanism, calling their church. That's very generous.
Confession. I call it confession.
That's still pretty. That is like a failing hedge fund. Is what Anglicanism is. Okay, like a failing hedge fund.
But yeah, I remember I saw Father Patrick Reardon speak some years ago.
Yeah.
And he said
Is he
was
still alive?
Last time I checked, he was. Yeah.
Okay.
But I haven't seen him in some years. But he was asked about like why by one of the questioners, like why he really started to make the journey from Episcopalianism to Orthodoxy. He said he came to the realization that in the Anglican Church, you can believe anything you want as long as you say the same thing. And in Orthodoxy, it was the opposite. You can say lots of different things as long as you mean the same thing.
Yeah. I think it was Father Thomas Reardon. For a while, I went on this kick where I read a bit of Thomas Merton.
Okay. Yeah, he was actually in the same monastery as Merton back in the 60s. Yeah.
And he said, I think it's Father Reardon, because Merton actually electrocuted himself in Bangkok off of a fan. And Father Reardon said something like, it was something like, I don't think Father Thomas even realized, or that he could have been, or no, sorry, Father Merton he said, I don't think that Father Merton even understood that someone could be killed off of electricity or something like that. Like, he was sort of the space cadet, who knows? I mean, he had no concept of the workings of this thing he was plugging in. It just shorted out. It killed him. It was very tragic. But that's the one thing I remember from Father Thomas Reardon. But I do wonder within the Catholic Church if the guys in charge actually believe the stuff that they're saying, or if they don't really, and they've just sort of spiritualized it away, and it now just comes down to a matter of saving face. And I have a feeling it's more so that. It's just we can't back down on these things because we'd lose face if we did. I tend towards that. Right. It really is the situation of like the Anglican Church, the Anglican failing hedge fund, where as long as you accept the Book of Common Prayer, i.e. the Pope, and has some sort of control, that you're just fine.
What do you think about the sort of controversy about the German bishops and like some of the ideas they have and how progressive some of their views are and how they kind of are trying to like influence the Vatican to kind of start giving them either freedom to do what they want in the German area or maybe influence all Catholicism everywhere by it?
Well, the Germans are very tenacious people, and they did it during the Gregorian reforms. I mean, they were the ones that pushed it through. So it won't be the first time they've taken over, but that situation, I don't believe it's even close to being resolved, and it's just going to continue as it is. But it's another example of, as long as you accept the Pope in some way, shape, or form, you're fine. What you actually really believe about homosexuality, what you really believe about the Eucharist, what you really believe about women's ordination, well, what do you really think about the Pope? Well, you accept him in some way. Okay, great. It's like big tent Catholicism is what they're going for. And again, this goes back to like the Latin Mass movement. It's effectively dead. It's sort of like Western Rite Orthodoxy. I think it's cool, right? But like, there's just not that big of an appetite for it.
Well, they had to. I mean, I know that Metropolitan Philip, at one point, he had to put the kibosh on the Western Rite parishes jumping over to Eastern Rite because it would cause a lot of problems. But what would happen is a lot of people would start out Western Rite in some of these parishes, the Antiochian Archdiocese, and then eventually they would get a taste of the Eastern Rite and go, wow, it's so beautiful, I like it. And he realized that if a bunch of people in this Western Rite parish started thinking like that, it's going to cause a schism. And I guess he had a couple conflicts like that where there's some internal grumblings. And a few parishes, the majority end up voting to go Eastern Rite. In the beginning, he let them. And then after a while, it's like, no, if you start Western Rite, you remain Western Rite, because that's the thing. You're a little minority. You're an island in the Orthodox world. Yeah. And you go visit your neighbor down the street and you see, oh, Eastern Rite, this is so different. I like it. It's kind of cool. Yeah. And that can create a lot of tensions. It's like, Do you think that I know we've discussed this before, but let's say in a hypothetical situation in which suddenly you had a pope come in and use that authority to try to back up several centuries to align themselves with Orthodoxy in several things, like dogmatic issues, maybe some practices in terms like when children are communion confirmed and things like that. What would happen in a world where they would want to do that but keep like the Novus Ordo and their current, like, can that be compatible? Like, is there a current way of ritual of worship that prevails in the Roman Catholic Church today compatible, or has it evolved so much over time that it's incompatible in any way with the Orthodox tradition?
You had churches in Rome that were so dedicated to the concept of facing east during the liturgy that the priests actually faced the congregation. And this was, 4th century, 5th century or so. You do have a handful of them. So I don't think that the priest facing ad populum is that big of a deal. I think it's more so the ad orientem that, to face. But even we have churches that, it's just because of zoning laws, liturgical east is that way, real east is over there. It happens, we took over a lot of pagan temples and just had to make do with them. Because, hey, there's a perfectly good stone building over there and, the harvest is coming in. We don't have extra money. Just convert the old temple.
Well, it's also a conquering of paganism as well.
Yeah,
it's like, we're
that too.
Like, oh, you guys, you're not in charge anymore. Christ is king,
Yeah, it's not like they're like, Jesus really is not facing east.
Let's demolish it and start over,
Yeah, I'm sure there were cases like that because they stole a lot of pillars off of abandoned temples. But I think that you could take a Novus Ordo. What would happen though is that if you go for the dogmas of the Eastern Church, you're going to eventually end up in the spirituality of the Eastern Church, and there's just no room for guitar masses in Eastern spirituality. It's just not there. It's just not there. It's like trying to fit an organ into Byzantine liturgy. It's like, this is hideous.
It doesn't fit.
It doesn't fit. And by the way, I know of one church that had an organ, and they have not used the thing in probably 20 years. Yeah,
there's a big move in the Greek Archdiocese away from it. That was Archbishop Iakovos, I think it was, introduced them.
Okay.
And I think in the last, like, all the younger priests coming out of Holy Cross, it seemed like they're trying to move in the opposite direction.
Yeah, they're not into it. But the Greeks have stuck with hideously ugly chandeliers in the churches.
The glass ones?
Yeah, they always have to look like spaceships or like big spiders or something. It's just like, oh boy. I notice these things. But I think that you could, if you got rid of these dogmas that are not apostolic, or these practices are not apostolic. The early liturgies were very dressed down. They were very simple because, they were in houses, so it had to be mobile, but it was reverent. And I just don't think that folk music is reverent. I think it'd be very nice, but it's entertainment ultimately. It's not actual worship. And for a long time in the Catholic Church, they only used voices. That was Gregorian chant. It was great. I don't think you need to do Gregorian chant in order to have authentic spirituality. Obviously. I also don't think you need to do Byzantine chant or Slavic chant. There will be an actual evolution of music to fit our language here in America.
What about the words of worship though? The various hymns for different times of the years and feast days in the Roman Catholic Church have continued to evolve. Some of them have a lot of like post-scholastic concepts, very, very, very forensic concepts, emphasis on, some of them sound like penal substitutionary atonement kind of concepts.
Yeah, you'd probably have to get rid of those.
Yeah, you probably have to like scrub them and, get rid of things that are contradictory to Orthodoxy, I guess.
You would. But there's a lot of hymns like Adoro Te Devote. That's a phenomenal hymn by Aquinas. Yeah. Phenomenal hymn. If you can read it in English, wonderful. But If you can read in Latin, even better. But my fear is not, I mean, people go, well, the Catholic Church is moving this more like, more towards Orthodox Christianity. And I'm just like, they're just trying to be all things to everybody. That's all they're really doing. And that's even more dangerous than just picking a position and sticking with it. Because, like, I'll tell you an interesting story. If you go to the Arab world, you find very, very, very few converts to Islam. Or, sorry, converts from Islam to Christianity. Very few. And people go, well, that's because they'd be killed. Okay, well, what about Turkey? Okay. I've lived in Turkey, I've lived in Syria, I've lived in the West Bank, I've lived in Oman. Okay. Right now, the Ecumenical Patriarchate and the Russians have lots of ethnic Turks coming in converting. I get messages from them regularly. Oh, yeah, my parish is about 12 of them. My parish is about 15. I'm one of about 20 of them. I'm one of 10 of them. We have, David Erhan, who's a convert from Islam. Okay. I think it's a lot easier to convert Turkish people because Turkish people are actually religious. I mean, Arabs, their religion is caffeine and cigarettes. I mean, you don't believe me. It's go over there. When I lived in Turkey, there were all these Westerners who had lived both in Turkey and in the Middle East. And the consensus was, Turks are significantly more religious than Arabs. It's very easy to convert a religious person from one religion to another compared to people who just don't care.
Well, I think that's been the problem. Yeah, that's the problem everywhere. I mean, that's definitely the problem in Western Europe. But also is the problem in certain places like in Eastern and where you have majority Orthodox countries. It's that religion for them is just, it's this quaint little thing you think about at Christmas or Pascha time when you practice these family customs.
Especially in Russia, they killed off all the religious people. I mean, there's a religious gene or genes that make us religious. If you kill off that in the population, how long is it going to take to get that back into the general population? Those people who are more religiously observant, who are more, I would say, genetically prone towards it, they're the ones who excite everyone else about religion, who get other people in. They're like that bacteria that you start the yogurt, or that culture that you start yogurt with, that yeast. God gives to some people that, like, boom, that little genetic bump to do something. You have to do something with it. It's the talent, pun intended. It is. As a kid, I thought it was great that said talent. So, but it's that talent that God gives you that you don't bury. You're there to excite people around you, to bring them in. And we're too shy about that. I'm the guy at church who I get to know people, and then when I don't see them for a few weeks, I text them, I ask them how they're doing. I haven't seen you, and they'll usually show up that Sunday. And if they don't, I wait a month or two, I text them again, and after a bit, if they don't show up, they don't show up. Okay, right. But you can get people to come back. You have to be that fanatic. You have to be that. You have to be the religious nutcase, right? But you have to be genuinely so. You have to be an engaging person to these people,
right? Yeah, and
you can't be the fuddy-duddy. So, but with Turks, I found that Turks have a more like actually authentic religious practice than most of the Muslim Arabs that I met.
It's interesting. Yeah, I haven't spent any time over there.
Yeah,
I've flown through Istanbul before. That's about the extent of my experience.
Istanbul's phenomenal. It's amazing.
It is a beautiful airport.
I lived there for a while.
Yeah, it's probably the best airport in the world, I think. Yeah.
Oh no, I lived in the city. I've been to Istanbul like 4 or 5 times, I think. It's a phenomenal city, absolutely amazing. The people there, Turks have this thing where they when they speak English, they have no intonation, because in Turkish, intonation is on the word. Not on the sentence. And then you show respect through use of certain endings on verbs, so it doesn't translate to English. So they come off as very, you want food? You're like, what? As far as they're concerned, they're saying like, I would love to give you food, but it doesn't translate quite correctly. But I do think that there's, the church is slowly regrowing. Well, percentage-wise, rapidly regrowing in Turkey.
Really?
Yeah.
You think it's the Russian presence there that has a big part of it?
It's the Greeks too.
The Greeks as well?
Yeah.
Okay. So like the Phanariates are actually bringing converts into the church then?
What happens is they have dreams. Christ appears to them in dreams.
I've heard that Christ appearing in dreams happens in Muslim countries way more than anywhere else. Dreams
are huge in Islamic culture.
Okay, that makes sense.
Do not ever tell someone from the Middle East, I saw something in a dream, unless you want to be interrogated about every detail of that dream and then updated regularly on which parts of that dream have proven to be correct. So I always want to plug good literature because people go, well, where do I start with reading patristics? And you guys are extremely lucky because you have a patristic scholar right here, and he is approved of these books. There's a great series, St. Vladimir Seminary Press, the popular patristic series. They're going to link it. They're going to put up a link to that series in the video description. But you have these great works like here, the Book of Pastoral Rule by Pope St. Gregory the Great. Father, do you give your approval to this book?
It is a good translation, yeah.
But as a work, it's phenomenal.
Yes, it's a good work, yeah. It's a good work, especially for people that are thinking about going into diaconate or priesthood or something like that. Yeah.
All right, St. Irenaeus of Lyon on apostolic preaching, very short work.
Yeah,
Incredible work, excellent. Talks, there you go. You have On the Holy Icons by St. Theodore the Studite. If maybe you've read St. John of Damascus's On the Holy Images.
It's a good compliment to that.
Good compliment to that. We have St. Basil the Great on Christian doctrine and practice.
Yeah, I just reread that actually a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, it's a bunch of different homilies. Homily on the beginning of Proverbs, homily on Psalm 14, homily on humility, homily on envy, on detachment from worldly things, on Psalm 115, on faith, on the beginning of the Gospel of John. Very excellent. We have this other one, The Testament of the Lord, Worship and Discipline in the Early Church.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's kind of a compendium of some early things, but yeah, it's an interesting work. I wouldn't say it's a what do you say, like a necessary text to read. Like someone who really wants to get into the Fathers, though, should probably read it to see it has a lot of historical, usage.
Okay. Then we have, you mentioned earlier, Hippolytus on the Apostolic Tradition, decent sized book. Yeah. Excellent book. Yeah. Has Father Joseph's
good
seal
introduction
approval.
To it, yeah.
Excellent introduction. We have On the Church Select Letters, St. Cyprian of Carthage.
Good. Also very excellent. My only thing is that I wish it had more of the letters in there because even with 2 volumes, it's still not all the letters. And obviously, there's once you get into reading St. Cyprian, you'd probably want to read them all.
Yeah, but it's a place to start.
Look
at
that.
Introduction. Not too bad at all. Look at that in comparison to my thumb. Not too thick. You can read it. We have like Divine Eros, Hymns of St. Simeon the New Theologian. If you're into poetry, do you like it?
Yes. I think this was the first thing I read was actually Archbishop Alexander Galitzin's earlier one on St. Vlad's Popular, which was the it was a 3-volume set, and this is the second thing they put out by Saint Simeon.
Wonderful,
and also very beautiful. I mean, just his experience of God is mystical and unbelievable.
And then finally, a book that is very close to your heart. It's a book that you recommend for people who want to get into patristics.
Yeah, every
and they've never read anything before.
Who asks me, yeah,
never read any patristics. This is a book that you recommend to them. Yeah. It is, Father, do us the honors.
On the Incarnation.
By St. Athanasius the Great. You can get these just simple books, really easy. Look how thin. Well, this one's kind of fat, but I mean, even the double set here. I mean, compared to my thumb, it's pretty thin. These are great books. Great way to get into patristics.
And keep in mind, each of them, part of that width is the introduction, which is the introduction is a actual scholar who's either the translator himself or another scholar in the field who's very knowledgeable, who's giving all the background information.
Absolutely.
Which, if you want to read contextually and understand where this fits in within church tradition, history, you need to know all those background things, the time period, what's going on, the historical controversies of the time. All these things are important to understand how that father's responding to this. So that's why this is a good. If you read something like on like Christian Ethereal Library, CCEL, it's
the Shaft series,
which is basically the Shaft series, but there's going to be very little contextualization, or if it is, it's from the 19th century by British Protestant scholars who a lot of that is just outdated information. So yeah, this is much better. They update these things regularly. They add new introductions every so many decades, and
And on top of it, they select the works that are most pertinent for people who they maybe. I mean, this is not written for scholars. It's written for interested laymen, and by laity, we mean like people that are not actual professional academics,
not specialists, not professionals.
Yeah, I mean people who just. They're like an electrician in Las Vegas, Nevada, and they go, "Wow,
sounds like somebody I know."
Yeah, someone who's great at eating pizza. It's like me. These are written for just normal people because you go, well, where do I start? And there's all these letters, all this works. Well, where do I begin? It's like, well, they've picked out the popular works for you, the ones that are most pertinent. They've given these phenomenal introductions. There's a link. You can buy them directly from St. Vladimir Seminary Press. And there is a link that they're going to put in the video description to where you can actually order these as all of the links to these. You basically pick out the topics you want.
Unless you're in the Miami area and come to Christ the Savior Cathedral, we have the biggest bookstore, Orthodox bookstore in Florida. That
is huge. Yeah. That is the largest Orthodox bookstore that I have ever seen.
Well, that's even better.
That is incredible. Yeah, you saw my delight when I saw 3 shelves of these. And I was like, I noticed there was a third shelf. It was like a second Christmas. So, and I mean, you're coming out with a book too.
I'm over halfway. I'm probably closer to 2/3 done. It's kind of summarizing the last 15 plus years, maybe longer than that, of looking at how the fathers interpret the Bible, but in this case, all models or images of salvation.
Wow.
So basically just various ways various images or ways to describe salvation. And so each section, each chapter is a different way that the fathers approach it. It's not locked in with a publisher yet. So I want to try to get the first draft of the manuscript done this year.
Wow.
And then we'll go from there.
So probably 18 months from now we can see it?
I hope so. Yeah, I hope that. I hope if I finish it by the fall, which is my plan, then I'll start talking to the publisher.
When it's actually published, come out to Las Vegas on interview. Absolutely. And we'll just talk all about. Well,
absolutely. You got to take me and show me all the cool. I've never been, so you can take me and show me all the cool things about Las Vegas. Things that are appropriate for a priest to do.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do some censorship on that one. I hope you like shooting machine guns. No, we'll just.
As long as I'm not shooting at a person, so I get defrocked, I'll be fine.
Yeah, we'll see some national parks. Well, there's some great national parks out there. Some great restaurants. Okay, you want to continue moving on?
So we were talking about some of these other finer distinctions, East-West distinctions, and I think the elephant in the room, at least in my opinion, I think the real issue that really distinguishes, we'll just say, all types of Orthodoxy, including, we would probably say that like the Coptic Church and Ethiopian would side with us on this, and what distinguishes us from the Roman Catholic Church and all forms of Protestantism would be the view on doctrinal development.
Yeah.
And I think that's, I would summarize the Orthodox view as we just don't have it, right? We don't have, because usually how it's understood is an evolution over time. If you want to redefine doctrinal development to be being able to express the faith in ways appropriate to that time, like using new language and so forth, I guess you could. I don't use it that way because that's not how people mean it.
But that's linguistic development. Right. That's terminological development.
That's cultural
adaptation,
like just putting it into, like the same way that you could, if you want to say, I think in one of our private conversations earlier today, you mentioned about the church at one point would use the lingo of Neoplatonism, and then a little bit later they might use the lingo of Latin terminology from the Scholastic movement because it was very.
That was the last episode.
Yeah. So it's how would you define the way that doctrinal development is understood particular, let's start with the Roman Catholic Church. We can branch off into some of the major Protestant denominations as well, if you know some information about that.
I know very little about Protestantism.
Okay. But certainly we can talk about the Roman Catholic Church. I think a figure that seems to loom large in this is Newman, who I think has a big piece of this. But as far as I know in patristics, I know that there's a section in De Trinitate, which has been quoted by later writers, where St. Augustine, in interpreting the passage from John's Gospel, where the Spirit will lead you into all the truth, he said that that'll be a continuous process that will continue to be led into new truths over time by the Spirit. Something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing. It's been a while since I've read it, but which would seem to be a patristic, at least if you make St. Augustine your primary source, which they tended to do in the Scholastic period. It would seem to give some kind of warrant to continue to find out new things that have never been found out before historically. But what does Newman do with this? Like in the 19th century, how does he use that to kind of justify change over time?
Oh, acorn to oak tree.
Which is a big change.
Yeah, that's a big change. In that debate that I did with Ibarra, he goes, well, there's a germ. And I couldn't believe he said that. Well, there's a germ. It just grows from there. Mm-hmm. It's like, and they talk about acorn to oak as though there's this clear trajectory.
Right.
That it'll just clearly grow into this. It's like, well, no, we can look at an acorn and we know exactly what it will look like. Mm-hmm. With doctrinal development in the 2nd century, if the way that they look at doctrinal development of acorn to oak, they had no clue where this was going. Mm-hmm. We know exactly where an acorn, what it grows and what it turns into. So that is a bad analogy. Right. What they are talking about is what I do in a conversation, and that is I start a sentence without knowing where I'm going to finish it. That's what they're doing. They're pulling a Denny in a conversation. Okay. They are not growing an acorn into an oak tree.
Can you think of any specific examples of something where it was started out at some point saying one thing or doing one thing, and it became something contradictory?
Well, yeah, I mean, so let's look at the Immaculate Conception. Okay. So the patristic witness is that Mary was purified at the Annunciation.
Right.
Okay, there you go. It's the majority view.
It would make sense. The Holy Spirit overshadowed her. It's biblical.
There you go. And that was the majority view. Well, they just, we're not going with it. They went with one of many minority views. Mm-hmm. Okay. And it was a minority view that many of their writers did not accept. Aquinas didn't accept it. Bernard of Clairvaux thought it was laughable. Mm. Okay, there you go. So it was a much later view. The whole doctrinal development did not come, well, it didn't do justice to say the Assumption of Mary. Okay, did she die or did she... Right. Does she seem to have talk about a useless statement. It doesn't tell us what the answer is. Mm-hmm. The dogma on the Assumption. The other would be on papal infallibility, papal powers in general. Mm. When you look into the early church, they would have been absolutely horrified by the idea that one bishop could come in and just overrule everyone. Right. They would have been absolutely, and we know they would have been horrified because, look, the best example, when they look for examples of papal infallibility or papal jurisdiction in the first millennium, the only one that I can possibly think of the Pope actually trying to act out something that would be akin to papal infallibility would be the first Constitutum of Vigilius, which he got excommunicated for, and he had to recant on. That is the best example that you can possibly find historically for papal infallibility. And it was rejected. Yeah. The fact that you have bishops excommunicating the Pope and then no one turns and goes, "You can't do that." It's like, that tells you something, the reaction. Mm-hmm. And this was a question that I asked Ibarra during that debate on Pints of Aquinas. Okay, so how was it that one pope was deposed? Mm-hmm. Okay, so if one pope was deposed and another was installed in his place, that means that either the second one was an anti-pope and the first one was illegally deposed, or that the first one was legitimately deposed, in which case, how you're judging the Pope, right? And someone is judging him. When it says the first see is judged by no one, it doesn't say by no bishop. It says no one.
Right.
And he's being judged by the emperor, he's being judged by a general, he's being judged by, then it turns out, Vigilius. So what is the situation? Either you can judge the Pope or you can't, but either way, you have an anti-Pope judging the former Pope. So is the deposition actually correct? By the way, in that debate, I brought that up as a complete spur-of-the-moment thing. That was not planned. That was not planned.
Right.
It's the most clipped part of the debate. It's completely spur-of-the-moment.
Yeah. What's a clear example? Yeah. I mean, what do you do with it?
Well, Justinian was extremely well educated. He was extremely well educated in canon law and theology. And you would have thought that, when the Pope is sent to him deposed, he would go, hold on, you cannot depose the Holy Father. Instead, he goes, whoa. He needs a proper episcopal trial. Send him back to Italy where he can be tried. I mean, of all the people who would know the answer, it's going to be Justinian.
The Nomo Canon is created by him,
Yeah, and then he had no qualms with breaking the Pope office as the Pope is cut off from Christian communion. We're not breaking with the See of Rome, but, with the Pope himself, okay, well, you're judging the Pope.
Yeah. Well, I was just reading just recently. I mean, you can really trace the entire continental legal tradition back to Justinian's Nomo Canon. So if anyone knew how these things work, he would be the guy. He's the origin of Western law.
A friend of mine who's a lawyer said he is a lawyer still. He said one of his favorite parts of law school is studying the Nomo Canon. It's phenomenal. And I was like, yeah, you have fun with that, Brian. You go get him, buddy. But you see again and again these examples that they bring forward, and either they're out of context or the example works against that like Catholic apologists will bring up, and either the example's out of context or it goes against what they're trying to prove.
Yeah. So let's say we define. Let's look at the definition that Newman gives: oak out of the acorn. Okay, so he's trying to say there's some kind of germ or seminal form that develops into the full thing. And so as far as I understand his writings, he says you just have to kind of find some evidences in the past. How often is that just anachronistic, just imposing the data you want on this early example? So that's what it means,
Usually. Yeah, I mean, Newman was one of these guys who would just sort of talk a circle around something and then suddenly go, therefore, and then give his opinion. And you're like, how does this have to do with anything? I find Newman extremely tedious to read because he's not clear, and he's not clear because he doesn't really have an argument.
Well, I mean, think about the 19th century, especially in England and America. That's literature is in the Romantic period. Everything is kind of a romanticized image of something, it's and you read his writings, you see he has this romantic image of the Catholic Church. That's what he wants to believe. He wants to believe that he is transferred over to the true church. So he starts with that presupposition that he's left Anglicanism because it doesn't represent the true church because of all the changes that were happening, and he very romantically looks at its history. He's looking at it through rose-colored glasses, and
Rome-colored glasses. Well, I mean, even Newman himself said, I believe it was Newman who said that papal infallibility, he said, I just wish the dogma would disappear.
Really?
I believe it was Newman.
That's very interesting.
He said it was like his embarrassment. Just like, I mean, if I'm wrong about that, correct me in the comments, but I believe it was him.
We'll see what Grok has to say about it. We'll go.
Yeah.
I jest.
Yeah. Grok, what did Newman say? We'll get some mediocre answer from an AI slop machine.
And then it'll compliment you.
Yeah. Great question. Yeah. By the way, ask better questions next time. The acorn to oak thing is based on us knowing where the trajectory is going. So you can't have an acorn to oak situation where it's contradicted in the past. So if you have repeated examples of the Pope being judged and the episcopate not reacting with horror but going along with it, like there's no evidence that restitution had to be made by the bishops who had agreed to cut off the Pope. If anything, the example or the evidence shows that restitution had to be made by the Pope who had been cut off. Now they'll go, oh, okay. Well, see though that it was edited out of the final conciliar acts. Yeah, and? Yeah, it was embarrassing for the Pope. Justinian had an agenda. He wanted to show unity. So of course, once he got what he wanted, okay, all right, now edit this out as part of the, you kissed the ring, therefore, we're going to cut this out. Okay, and it still occurred, and there's no evidence that anyone had to do penance for it. There's no sign that it was anything out of the normal. The churches would break communion, reestablish communion. That's how it was. They would depose other heads of churches. They would reinstate them. Done. So in the case of the acorn to the oak tree, yeah, it's a contradiction of how things were done with the papal dogma, with the Annunciation. I would say with the Assumption, but with the Assumption, the doctrine doesn't really state one thing or the other. Did she die and she was assumed, or was she assumed alive? I mean, we know the liturgical evidence from the East. We have the Feast of the Dormition of the Mother of God on August 15th. It's clear, lex orandi, lex credendi. As we pray, so we believe. Okay, it's there. They're talking now about, let's see, what else? What I say is, okay, you look at something like the Filioque. The concept of a hypostatic Filioque, it's just not there in the majority of authors. Edward Sachensky's book, The Filioque, is very good. It just goes through author by author by author.
Very balanced.
Yeah, very fair. Okay, you can see something approaching it, like in St. Augustine. Let's just say St. Augustine is a full-blown hypostatic Filioquist. Okay, well, St. Augustine also is under a lot of Platonic influence, and this is where he comes from, the concept of emanation as being from the essence. All right, okay, what about everyone else, though? We have to look for a general understanding of the fathers. And, we have three witnesses from the first millennium. One of them is the very colorful character, Anastasius, the librarian, a guy who, this guy must have been a riot. He was at one time an anti-pope. He was one of the few men in Europe who could actually read Greek, him and Duns Scotus Eugena. Anastasius was accused of being accomplice to a murder as well. And he had a few other things. Even after being an anti-pope and this accusation, they still brought him back. And the reason is the guy was so educated. Now, I've heard people say, well, why should we trust anything he says? Look at this, look at that. It's like, well, because even after doing all of that, he was so educated that they still brought him back. He was so valuable that they're like, all right, we're willing to overlook this whole anti-pope thing. We're willing to overlook the very likely fact that you helped get someone murdered. We're going to use you. You're useful, okay? And even he says, no, we don't believe in the hypostatic Filioque. No, we don't. Duns Scotus Eugena, same thing. No, we don't believe in it. St. Maximus the Confessor, when he talks about the Latins, he goes, no, they don't believe that there's just from the hypostasis. No, absolutely not. Okay, so we see that this was not the belief, at least in the 7th, 8th and 9th centuries in the West. Okay. So did they just lose the faith during that time, supposedly? No, it's that even a lot of St. Augustine's views were not consistently accepted. Like his views on grace, his views on delayed ensoulment, which led to his
transducianism or different things.
What's that?
Transducianism, it's pretty clear that that's probably what he seems to.
Absolutely. And St. Jerome believed it. I believe, is it St. Jerome, I believe? Or I think he had another odd view. I forget, though. Don't quote me on that. Someone in the comments, please. We'll work the algorithm with them commenting more and more. St. Augustine had a lot of views. There's a letter from Pope, I want to say Pope Hermisdas, to the Scythian monks saying like, look, we don't accept everything St. Augustine says. It was about grace in general. So why should we accept what St. Augustine says on the Filioque over and against what we see the entire East and then later on the most educated people in the West saying?
Right.
I mean, who's going to know better what the West actually believes? Two guys who were experts on Greek at the time. One of them was constantly in communication with the East. A guy who was so valuable that they overlooked his colorful past. Or, just some later reading back into it by, well, I read in, this apologetics manual, and, where it cites Dominion, I'm going to try and rip it off and play it off as my own. No, we're not going to believe that person. We're going to believe actual witnesses at the time. And it is very much true. Yeah, Latin is not nearly as precise as Greek. That goes without saying.
A smaller vocabulary. Yeah.
It's a smaller vocabulary. It's a very pretty language. I love it. I teach it. But it's no one who is even remotely familiar with both languages would even try to compare the two. Greek is the technical language of the time.
Right.
It is the, it is what you would do. I mean, technical writing could only be done in the ancient world in Greek. So that's why it was a philosophy language. So that's my 2 cents on that.
The Council of Trent seems to be one of these like touchstones in the Roman Catholic Church, and it seems like a lot of things were codified for the first time at Trent. But even Trent, a friend of mine, Cassian King, who does the
he's a nice guy. I like him. Yeah,
he did an episode, I think it was about a year ago, where he looked at some of the views espoused by the popes of the late 19th through the 20th century, and how some of them directly contradict things said that were dogmatic at Trent. So even Trent is supposed to be, although it's supposed to have been sort of this kind of massive codification, kind of in opposition to Protestantism and things developing, it seems that even from there, like for example, it said very clearly at Trent that the ancient tradition was to wait till children were much older to commune them.
Yeah,
and then starting in the late 19th century, all the popes seemed to start saying, no, that was actually not the original tradition. Yeah. And it's pretty clear that it wasn't. But one of the things that really struck me that I learned about Trent is their idea, like implying that the Bible was like meant to always be in Latin, and you could correct Greek translations from the Latin as if Latin was the original language of the scriptures. That seemed very odd to me. I don't know what motivated that, other than to try to say like, this is what we use. We're going to make it higher than everything else.
I'm not familiar with that part, but I mean, you're a highly educated person. I'll take your word on it. I'm not. I can't speak to that simply because I'm not familiar, but it does sound absolutely idiotic.
Well, how I found out about that was I was going over in one of my classes at the university. I was looking at the encyclical De Verbum, the 20th century, about the importance of scriptures, and they give this quote from Timothy about how all scripture is for correction of in doctrine, this and like it's that famous quote about what is Holy Scripture that a lot of Protestants quote as well, right? Yeah. And then they give the quote, and of course De Verbum was written in Latin.
Yeah.
They give the quote, but then they have to put in brackets there, taken from the Greek translation because the Latin one doesn't actually say what they wanted to say. So they called it taken from the Greek translation. I go, what does this mean? Because it doesn't line up with the Vulgate. So that's how I did it. That led to me following a little bit of a rabbit trail. So.
Oh, jeez.
But that's maybe a sign of that's another sign of doctrinal evolution. This idea that somehow now that Latin's been, which wasn't even the original language of the Church in Rome, right? That's otherwise they wouldn't be saying Kyrie eleison and Christi eleison in the Latin Mass, but Latin became the ascendant language, so that by the time you get to Trent, it is the holy tongue that you can even correct the original Greek from and alter it to fit the Vulgate or whatever the official Latin translation is. It seems like that is, to me, it seemed like a really clear sign of like, this is evolution. These are thoughts and ideas evolving over time. And then you have to conform everything prior to this new way of looking at things, you know?
So even in the idea of the metaphor of the acorn to the oak tree, those are not the same thing.
Yeah.
They really aren't. I mean, what is this? This is an acorn. Okay, what is this? Well, at a certain point, it becomes a tree.
And of course, Newman did not know about DNA, so you can't say like, well, the DNA is there. Well, he didn't know about DNA. That was discovered to the 50s, right? Yeah, with Crick, you know.
There you go. But I mean, you do see that. I mean, when is it doctrinal development, and when is it just development of terminology? And the answer is, well, when it's development of terminology, it's terminology developing. Development of doctrine would be the content is evolving. You can tell the content's evolving because it's contradicting previous teachings and previous episodes in history. Mm-hmm. And so much of the time, I mean, you're seeing this sort of Pope of the Gaps argument. Well, just because they didn't say this about the Pope doesn't mean that they didn't think it. And you're just like, all right, you're squeezing this in, and that's an argument from silence.
Well, I think so. Maybe one other example I could think of would be the celibate priesthood, where
that's a practice, they would say, because they have their whole different
depends how you ask. Some of the most recent defenses I saw against, you know, when Francis has mentioned the Orthodox option of like allowing married priests or whatever as something he was like when he was Pope that he would consider, you know. There were some responses by some of the theologians saying like, no, this is what's been revealed by God, the celibacy of the priesthood, and like this sort of language, right? And that was some of the arguments that were made in the medieval period for it as well.
Oh, by Peter Damian.
Yeah, this is revealed by God. Now, for us, it is just a practice. Like for the bishops to be celibate was something the church decided was expedient.
Yeah.
Technically speaking, could we go back to having married bishops? We probably could, even though it's been the case probably since at least the 500s. That was pretty much the standard. And, you know, it was still kind of a gradual thing. By
the Quintisex Council, it was codified.
It was already codified, yeah. But yeah, it was an expedient thing to do. It wasn't a doctrinal thing. It wasn't based on a biblical or theological dogma per se.
It had to do with property management,
the size of dioceses, like lots of different practical matters.
Well, now that we have the concept of incorporation, you could get back to it, I think.
Yeah, and we don't, and not all, particularly the custom that developed of choosing the bishops from the monastic class has become, by and large, in many places, just sort of it's just given lip service. Like a lot of bishops are just like tonsured like Monday and consecrated bishop on Tuesday, or in some cases, like in the Antiochian diocese now, they don't even do that anymore.
Oh,
they don't officially tonsure the monks first. So that's not, because it was never technically part of the dogma or part of the official canons.
It would definitely, I mean, I'm a big fan. I'm actually a fan of allowing married bishops, but I think you should be over a certain age. Like you should be at least like 55.
Yeah, and no kids under some certain age, you know.
Something like that. And the reason I'm a fan of it is that one, these guys have, or more likely have real life experience.
Right.
Okay. Two, by 55 or by say 60, you know, you and your wife are really like friends at that point, you know? And, you know, if you're away for a few days, you know, you can bring your wife along with you, and you don't have small children. But the real thing is that it totally cuts down on the Skittles class infiltrating the episcopate, right?
Yeah. Well, we already have a married episcopate. We have lots of widowers who technically were married most of their lives.
We had one at my parish of blessed memory, Bishop... I'm going to butcher his name, Ilia Katra.
Okay.
He was head of the Albanians, and he was a retired bishop when he came in. You know, his back problems, he wasn't able to stand through a whole service. Right. He was a very sweet man, sweet man. He died a couple years ago, but he'd been a widower.
Yeah. Sometimes they make really good bishops, you know, because that life experience, you know.
Yeah, they have you know, real world experience. They can relate to their congregations. They tend to, you know, whereas like, I'm not going to say like, I mean, I just think that the Catholic Church would function much better if they had married priests, if they made that an actual option.
Right. Well, there is an option. You just become an an Anglican first.
Yeah.
And that option, you come in as a married, they'll receive you as a married priest with your kids and everything. Yeah. Which is kind of a funny thing that they would even claim that that this is dogmatically the case of celibacy.
What do you do about the Byzantine churches? Yeah.
Right. When they have and they allow it in the Eastern Rite churches as well.
Well, and there you go. It's like, it sounds like it's something that is officially, it's a practice, but it's not an actual dogma. But then you have people trying to chalk it up to dogma. I remember at church when I was growing up, someone said St. Patrick's father was a priest, and just like the what? Like, well, yeah, was grandfather a priest? His father a deacon? It was something like that. His father was a
deacon. I think his grandfather's a priest.
His grandfather's a priest. Like, what? How did that happen? Well, it had to have been, after, before he was ordained, he had children. It's no, I think it's Socrates and
who was it? Is it was Julian? Was it Julian of one of the bishops who was friends with Pelagius? So about this dialogue with St. Augustine, that St. Augustine believed, he was one of the first ones to start saying that bishops really shouldn't be married. Like he mentions this, and that this is his view, right? Because he's so hung up on concupiscence,
Yeah. He's really like, we have that icon, the joy of all who sorrow. St. Augustine's really like the sorrow of all who joy. I like him as like a person. I think his confessions are a great work. Yeah. But at the end of the day, like, one of the reasons why we know St. Augustine had so many odd ideas is because he wrote so much.
Right.
Can you imagine, like, okay, all right, let's take me, okay? 200 years from now, let's say, with all the stuff that I have on YouTube, 200 years from now, they're going to look at me and they're going to go, Danny was a man of his time. He made mistakes, He was a religious fanatic. Danny was a religious fanatic. Danny didn't believe in women's rights. Danny, was slightly to the left of the Taliban.
Whatever.
They're going to look at me and say, and then they're going to realize I was right. But, so maybe not a good example, but like St. Augustine he was a humble guy, and he admitted when he was,
he retracted a lot.
And he's a very inspiring figure, but he was, he was clearly like struggled with guilt. He had Saint Monica sounds like a very inspiring mother, but she's also very overbearing.
The first helicopter mom.
Yeah, it's like,
but Augustine's right. He's writing back and forth with this supporter of Pelagius, right? And this guy, I think it was Julian, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a while since I looked at this, but in their dialogue at one point, just to get under the skin of Augustine, he says to him, why don't you keep saying that stuff while I go and sleep with my wife? Oh, because he was married. He was a married bishop at that time, and Augustine didn't really like married bishops. He was kind of against it, and was advocating for bishops who should live celibately or things like that.
The sorrow of all the joy.
Julian stuck it to him right where he knew it hurt.
It's just, I think it's either Sozomen or Socrates in their ecclesiastical history early on. And if I can find this citation, I'll put in a comment under the video. He mentions that there were many bishops who fathered children while they were bishops. Yeah. And, they were writing in, I think, 400s, early 400s. Yeah. Theodore of Syre is like, they would try to get me for being married twice. Presumably his first wife died, but he lived, Theodore of Syre, let's see, he was at Chalcedon 451, and he died sometime later. By the way, Theodore of Syre actually has some great writings.
He's not bad. He doesn't seem to pick up. He still has a bit of. This is a really complex conversation, but there's the theology of Diodor of Tarsus was called it can be summed up as the two ages.
Absolutely.
There's still a bit of that in Theodore, but it's not as pronounced. And he's definitely reading other people. It seems like he probably also read Saint Cyril.
He starts to adopt the hypostatic union.
Yeah.
He his work, the monks of Syria, is it the monks of Syria is a work of Theodore, where he tells them miracle stories of various monastics he met out in the desert. Phenomenal work. Phenomenal. He also writes this really great questions and answers on the Pentateuch. And he has a very like easily accessible style to read, back to the question of like the Catholic Church sort of going back on itself and whatnot, because they have all these levels of magisterium that they then turn around and read back into history. They will just typically, we're just reinterpret it. It's just a reinterpretation. It's just, we're just clarifying it. That's typically what happens. And again, we're seeing this really stark difference between like the Catholic apologetics class, the Trent Horns and the Michael Loftons and whatnot. And then what the actual scholars are saying, what the actual Pope is saying.
Right.
And that's not magisterial. It's like, well, everything the Pope says is magisterial in some sense. I mean, Lumen Gentium 25.
Right.
It's just a question of what level of magisterium.
Right. And is there any kind of official, like, that's what I think we talked about this earlier, is there any official list of how you rank these various statements and opinions of the current, of whatever the current Pope is? Which
encyclicals are infallible, which are not.
Right.
There's no magisterial, in the Catholic Church, there's no magisterial list of which councils are ecumenical. Or there's no infallible list, I should say. There's no infallible list you look in the catechism and it says that this is the whatever council. The only parts of the catechism that are infallible are the ones that cite infallible documents.
Interesting.
The catechism itself is not infallible. It's only the documents it cites that are infallible. Only what cites infallible documents is the catechism infallible. Thereby, the catechism is not infallible. It is the documents it cites.
Right.
It pulls from infallible sources. That's it. I mean, this is why, like, what was it? Pope Paul now they call him a saint, actually. Was it the sixth one who did Vatican II? But yeah. He said, well, there's 7 ecumenical councils and the other councils are general councils of the West.
Interesting.
How could he get away with saying that if there was a magisterial, or if there's like an infallible or dogmatic list of which councils are ecumenical?
Right. Well, he was also the one that was in his writings saying that they need to be more palatable and be more like the Protestants and things like that. Yes. So, I mean, obviously by kind of reducing to 7 councils, you're aligning yourself with, maybe conservative Lutherans, Anglicans, some of the mainline Protestant groups that might say the same thing.
Yeah.
So,
I
mean, there are progressive Orthodox scholars who try to say the same thing. We only have 7 councils, and they try to greatly minimize or ignore the provincial councils that happen after that.
The pan-Orthodox councils. They try and get rid of them.
Particularly the Pauline councils, because they don't want to deal with the essence energies distinction, for example.
Yeah.
They'll come up with a byword like, Neopaulinism or something to try to dismiss it, and
Well, okay, so also you have like Pope Eugene at the Council of Florence. He introduces a council as the 8th Ecumenical Council. Really? Whatever happens to Leon I, Leon II? Right. Another ecumenical, he just goes as the 8th Ecumenical Council. So they don't have like an actual infallible list of councils. So this is an issue that I find with Catholicism, is that they present it as though it's this very clear system. And the reality is that they just have more steps until they get to, we don't know. They really just kick the can further up they kick the problem further upstream, so to say. So here's an example. So for example, we have clarity because we know what the ecumenical councils are. There's 21 of them. Okay, how do you know there's 21? Well, it says in the catechism there's 21. Okay, but which infallible document does it cite saying there's 21? Okay, there isn't one. Okay, there's no infallible list of who the popes were. So in order to have an ecumenical council, you have to have a valid pope to make a council validly ecumenical in the Catholic Church. And that assumes the Catholic definition of ecumenical, which is dogmatically binding. For us, ecumenical, as you know, just means imperially sponsored. It has nothing to do with dogma one way or the other. It just means it was a council of the oikumene. So, all right, you can only have an infallible ecumenical council, or a true ecumenical council, if you have a true pope signing off on it. Okay, So then you must have an infallible list of who the real popes were. No, you don't. No, you don't actually. It's a list that's edited by scholars fairly regularly. You don't have that either. Okay. All right. Maybe in ecumenical councils, at the beginning of it, it'll say, well, this is the whatever ecumenical, the 10th, the 15th. Okay, great. The problem is that the actual acts of a council are not infallible. It's only the decrees of the council that are infallible. So where do you go from there? They go, well, the Orthodox Church, you don't have dogmas on this, but we do. And it's like, okay, you formulated your dogma on that like 60 years ago. Mm-hmm. So suddenly we're just supposed to come up with a dogma on something because you do. You're presuming that we need a dogma on it because from your own paradigm, you think that it's important. But to us, it's not an important issue. Mm-hmm. This is a big problem for them. Like in that debate with Voice of Reason, he goes, all of his critiques were based on the concept of Catholicism as the standard. And yeah, he's a disingenuous guy, but he could not see it. He could not see it at all. That, hey, he even says at one point, but the Catholic Church defined its dogma on this and Humanae Vitae. It's like, well, he just admitted he's using. So then when I went after a standard, he then couldn't believe it. Well, we're not talking about Catholicism. No, we are, because you just said the standard is Catholicism. I'm now pointing out that your standard doesn't work. So their attitude is, if you don't have a dogma on something that we do, you're deficient. If we, though, as Catholicism, don't have a dogma on something that you do, well, it never mattered to begin with.
Right, it's a double standard is what it is.
Yeah, it's extreme double standard. So, for example, they don't have a dogma on essence and energies.
Right. Well, and they allow their Eastern Rite churches to actually confess essence and to declare that St. Gregory Palamas is a saint.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, it's you have essence energies, you have Scotism's formal distinction. The problem is no one agrees on what the formal distinction is. You can have, the absolute divine simplicity of as espoused by Aquinas. Even in areas where they've battled back and forth, and we don't necessarily have a dogma, neither do they. For example, on how God knows what the future is. Well, they just decided that it never really mattered, so they don't need a dogma. That was a decision.
Wonder if God foresaw that.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, why does this even matter? So you go, well, you don't have a dogma on the Immaculate Conception. It's like, why should we?
Right.
Well, it's important. Why? Well, I mean, you should know this. Why? Why does it matter?
We don't really have official doctrines on pretty much anything related to Theotokos other than the title Theotokos. We don't generally do that. We don't make dogmas over liturgical practice. We don't make dogmas over traditions about certain saints. They're part of our holy tradition.
Sure.
But they're not dogmatized in the way that Christology or Triadology has been dogmatized.
Okay, yeah, that is true. I mean, there's a lex credendi, lex orandi, lex credendi. Okay, yeah, sure, but that's still not formulating dogma. I mean, that's under that a bit. And okay, but yeah, I mean, we're just, the question I ask again is like, why do we need a dogma on this? Like, the Catholic Church has no dogma or no teaching on how you deal with a heretical pope. You think that'd be important?
Right.
We have a teaching on it.
Right. Yeah, we have.
You depose them. Yeah. They don't have a teaching on it. I heard one guy claim that haec sancta in ecclesiastical, haec and classical pronunciation, but yeah, he claimed that haec sancta was like the teaching on it, and I'm just like, no. I mean, you read it; it was accepted, saying as long as it doesn't prejudice the rights of the Roman See. It's like, well, yeah, okay, it's totally you totally castrated it, you declawed it, defanged it, but for them it's because they have a dogma on it, therefore we need to jump to get a dogma on it as well. Right. It does not occur to them, it is so beyond what they understand to be like, okay, look, it just doesn't matter to this group. We don't think this is a matter of like dogma here.
And there are also many things that just fall within the realm of pastoral application, like in certain praxis, things that they have tried to say are in encyclicals are doctrinal issues sometimes they are pastoral things, and it might differ from person to person. The bishop or priest needing to apply things uniquely in those situations, and then they say, "Oh, well, you Orthodox are ambiguous about this, or you're ambivalent, or something." Like, no, it's just this might not. What's good for the goose isn't necessarily good for the gander in this particular instance, and that's why we've never formally felt we've had to dogmatize this. So that's
well, and that's, I mean, they don't even really have that clear of a fasting tradition now at this point. They've gutted it. And what I was told when I said, well, you guys, I mean, you have teaching that you need to fast, was it 2 days a year? Okay. He goes, well, but do you really need to be told that you need to fast? And I'm like, oh, okay, that's a double standard. Do you really need to be told, insert name of pet Catholic dogma? It's a lot more illusions of clarity than actual clarity.
Right.
In reality, it tends to just kick the problem further upstream rather than resolve it. And especially when you look at the history of birth control and the understanding thereof, it's like there's no real clear teaching in the Church Fathers. Very few of them wrote about it. The handful of them that did, like St. Augustine, actually critiqued the rhythm method. He did not think it was acceptable from the appearance. By the way, if you want a great book on the history of contraception, the Church Fathers, John T. Noonan's book, Contraception, is phenomenal. It's the standard work on the topic. Every work I read on the topic to make that video on contraception, the Church Fathers, every work that I read on it kept referring back to Noonan's book.
Right.
Phenomenal book.
Noonan, Noonan?
Yeah, Noonan. Yeah, and he was a judge of the, was it the Ninth Circuit? Was that the one in California? I mean, he did the translations from Greek and Latin himself. He was a super intelligent guy. Yeah, and he points out rather wryly that the first mention of a contraceptive technique is a condemnation from St. Augustine of Hippo of the rhythm method.
Interesting.
So it's like, well, there they felt fine just sort of ignoring St. Augustine. But it's that.
Well, I think that, certainly, there could be some positive takeaway from this. I mean, we talked about earlier that it seems very unlikely that the Orthodox Roman Catholic Church would end up aligning and entering back into communion, but there does seem to be some bit of a mechanism for them to overturn their own ideas over time.
Yeah, they just clarify it away.
Yeah, just clarify it away, and if they clarified it away in the direction of the East.
Well, I mean, how do you back out of something like Pastor Aeternus? I mean, how do you clarify that away? Yeah. How do you clarify away that the Pope has free, direct? I'm trying to think of the term that it uses. He has direct access to all of the faithful over and above the bishops. No one can, counter his judgment. Yeah. How do you clarify that away? All of a sudden, well, he has that if the bishops agree, and it's like that was ruled out in there.
That's a good point.
And the issue with the Catholic Church is that, if it's a lot easier to, like I said, it's a lot easier to convert people who actually have a stance, who are actually religious. Okay. But now what you're seeing in the Catholic Church is that it's just a sort of like big tent Catholicism.
Right. No, when liberation theology can live side by side with people that are still into the ressourcement patristic movement, and those kinds of approaches are incompatible. I don't see, and there's also people that are essentially I've met people in the Roman Catholic Church who essentially are Protestants, but they just accept that the Pope, is an important figure, and they want to be part of a single church because they believe, Protestantism just keeps breaking into smaller groups and unity is important, but they basically have their theology is Protestant when you talk. I mean,
are these people in good standing and
Yeah. Some of them are teachers in Catholic schools and universities.
And and I mean, I'm sure the local bishop just doesn't seem to have a problem with that. And
So I think really it really is. There isn't Roman Catholicism. There are Catholicisms under Rome. I think that's really what it is. And you can find your very progressive camp. People that align with who's that priest in America, the one that supports gay marriage and so forth.
James Martin.
Yeah, you find people that are in that
That
camp.
dude is creepy. When you watch him talk, he is creepy.
And that there are people that align with him. There are bishops that look the other way and don't have a problem with him. Obviously, he's still an active priest in good standing, teaching and doing the things he's doing. And then you have other ones that are uber traditionalists.
Well, I mean, the reason why you can have someone like Father James Martin is because the priesthood and the Episcopal College and the Catholic Church, I mean, it has more fruit than an orchard. I mean, it's the number of these clergy that I meet where it's like, whoa, okay. Wow, that was very creepy. I mean, Catholic clergy, and it's, they get access. They think, well, if I have to be celibate, I'll control myself. And, and then they have this abuse scandal on top of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes, do we have celibate priests in Orthodoxy in parish settings? Of course we have. They're not.
Very few.
Yeah, they're not extremely common. We have some. But in generally, celibacy works best in a monastery because of all the checks and balances of the brotherhood. Basically acts as a controlling mechanism to isolate this and direct it towards good with the guidance of an abbot. I mean, is it possible for a monastery to go off the rails? Of course.
It's happened, and we deal with it right away. We don't pass them around.
Right. But yeah, when your entire priesthood is celibate, and they're put into a social setting with all these different people,
there's a reason why the first monastics went out into the desert.
Exactly. Yeah, protect everybody from them and protect themselves from everybody.
Absolutely, yeah. It's like there's certain things that you just shouldn't tempt yourself with.
Yeah. Well, there's like a canon. One of the pastoral canons that we have in Orthodoxy is you don't let a beardless youth into the monastery.
Yeah.
Like he has to be old enough to be able to be a man and stand up for himself. Correct. And know what he's doing and not be a temptation to the other brothers. And, so this is a canon. Celibacy
can do some really strange thing to some guys' heads.
Just like we have a canon that a woman housekeeper cannot live in the house of the bishop.
Absolutely.
Which happens all the time in other settings outside of Orthodoxy. But this idea you have a celibate bishop with a female housekeeper living in there, that's a huge temptation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like as a general practice, I just don't allow myself to be even alone with other women. I mean, that's just a good practice for males in general. Not only to avoid scandal or to avoid accusations, but for your very own self. Because St. Anthony the Great says, accept temptation to the last breath. Don't ever think you're above temptation. Sure, you could probably put a solid pound of some sort of powdery addictive substance in front of me, and I'm not going to. Never tried it, never wanted to, have no
like
interest.
Powdered donuts we're talking about.
Well, if it's powdered donuts, I'd lose all control. But especially there's like some coffee next to it. It's a matter of time until those. It depends. I mean, they're not like those packaged donuts. If like fresh ones,
yeah, like the real deal.
Oh yeah, if they were like the packaged ones, I'd probably vomit while looking at them. But I mean, if it's like the real deal, it'd be pretty hard to say no. But you don't want to like put yourself into temptation's way to make a point.
Right.
It's not a good practice in general.
I mean, what if maybe a fool for Christ could do it, and that's such a rare, like Saint Andrew the Fool went into the brothels to evangelize the prostitutes.
That's not Danny.
Yeah, you have to be a fool to do that. To be able to get away with that.
I'm a fool, but not a fool for
not
Christ.
That kind of fool.
It's I was going to break the example of Mahatma Gandhi, who was a creep, a complete creep, and a horrible person. He would try and tempt himself with young women, and it's just like, this guy's a creep. It's like, no, this is not a good practice. This is traumatic to them. It's traumatic to you. You're going to fall into temptation. Just cut yourself off from this stuff. Mm-hmm. Like for me, we just know we cannot have a plate of baklava in the house because Denny will destroy it. Okay. I mean, you could have a pack of cigarettes in my house for a year. Things not getting opened. And I can actually tell you 2 years because I had a guy give me some cigars and these little Tipperella ones. Oh yeah. It has been in my truck for 2 years now. I've not touched it. I'm just like, I have no interest. I've had bottles of whiskey in my closet for or my pantry for 7-8 months. And I'm just like, yeah, it's not my thing. But that doesn't mean that you can resist other temptations. It doesn't mean you should put yourself in the way. Mm-hmm. When I have friends who have been sober for however long, I don't even bring up alcohol around them. I don't mention it. I don't physically even bring it. I don't drink it. Nothing. You shouldn't be doing things that tempt people around you. You should be doing things to help remove them from that temptation. And I think it's the same thing with women. If you're a celibate, unless you're just one of these people who's like asexual, and they exist. I'm sure as a confessor, you've encountered these people who just have no desire at all. I mean, and those people are so few and far between. Okay. Unless they're one of those people, I don't think it's a good idea for celibate men to be in the general population. Like as a long-term goal, celibate.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. It's just, I don't know how that was ever thought to be a good thing historically. I don't understand it.
Do you know what Metropolitan Jonah told me one time?
No.
He told me this personally, because it's back in the day when I was thinking about becoming a priest before I realized I'd be a disaster. Okay. He goes, Denny, either find a good wife or find a good monastery. And I said, wait, does that mean like for me specifically? He's like, all guys.
Yeah.
Find a good wife or find a good monastery.
Yeah. We have to be tamed in some way. We have to channel that masculine energy in a good way.
Well, and plus living with women civilizes men. Yeah. It's a good thing. I'm very grateful to my wife and my daughters for civilizing me, and you learn to be more gentle when you have daughters, and you learn to appreciate women, because men tend to be very hard on women, very demanding, and then when you have daughters, you learn to see the world through you learn to see the world a bit how women do. It makes you more sensitive to them. And
I think we civilize each other. I think it happens both ways.
I was going to leave out that part, but yeah.
Well, it's true. There's a certain balance we give to women, and they can move a little bit more towards the center slightly.
Well, especially having kids.
But they pull us also a little bit away from some of our selfish tendencies, and
I mean, especially having kids, like the way that, like you meet women before they have kids, and then after they have kids, like two different people.
Right.
I mean, having kids civilizes women, and I mean men to an extent, right?
My experience was the moment you look into your first child's eyes, that's it.
Oh, I got a story for you about that. Okay.
That's it for you. Like you fall in love, and then you're like, okay, I'm not the same guy anymore.
So I was when my first child was born. Before that, I was thinking like maybe I should go back abroad and get work. The economy in the U.S. isn't working out. Well, I should go get my master's in teaching, be a teacher. I don't want to stay in construction. I've been doing this for the most part since I was 12. Oh my gosh, slave labor for my dad, right? He's a general contractor. And I remember my daughter was born, and they handed her to me, and she let out a few, baby squawks. Like, meh, meh. They handed her to me, and they're all wrapped up in a blanket, and you're like ready to pick something up that's like 25 pounds. And they hand them to you, and they're so light.
Right.
And you're just, all of a sudden, you're like, oh my God. Like if I move quickly, they'll just like fly out of my arms, Well, I remember like putting my hand like on top of her, like, oh my gosh.
They're so fragile. And
it's like a balloon. It'll just float away. I'm like, and I remember looking at her, and she's like, she kind of opened her eyes, and I remember immediately saying to myself, without you verbally express it saying, I have to grow up now.
Exactly.
I have to be an adult. I have to make this work. I'm going back into construction. And that was it.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah, your life changes in an instant. Yeah.
So it's, yeah, I mean, having kids, it makes men grow up. It's, I mean, I should take back what I said. It's, yeah, getting married civilizes us a bit. Having kids civilizes us more. And, you know, and people who can have kids and choose not to, they are to society what renters are to a neighborhood. They're not invested in it.
Well, I've told people, you know, I will not perform the marriage if you are young and able to have kids and you could tell me that you're not going to have kids.
Yeah, you better.
Because a big part of my premarital class is like the importance of children and how many times we say it in Orthodox wedding service over and over again.
If you can have kids and you don't, that you got to have, you know, you really need to. I mean, there are couples, quite a few of them I know they can't. It's very devastating for them.
And then they have to choose. I mean, they could adopt or they could choose to like be, you know, they could do something else, go work in a home or something so they can contribute to, you know, there's lots of things they could do if they can't physically have children. But
think about all the things that monastics have to do, because monastics are always very, very joyful, very selfless people. Think about the asceticism that monastics have to put themselves through in order to attain the state that most parents have. It's quite a bit, you know.
Right.
I mean, you know, there's something to be said for having someone else's feces in your hair at 2 a.m. while they vomit on you.
It's ascetical practice.
Yeah, I mean, you're just, you know.
Like, you know how the monastic literature says, like, oh, I had to snatch a little bit of sleep by the neck and then let it go after a couple hours, you know. It's like, well, we actually have to deal with that with our kids.
Well, I have an amazing wife, so she, you know, she handles this stuff, you know. I'm like, you know, Baloo from the Jungle Book, just like, you know, like passed out. You know, my wife is very, very phenomenal wife, very wonderful wife. Very lucky to have such a very domestically minded wife, who's very loving to the children. But, you know, the sacrifice that you make as I mean, do you know how many jobs I've wanted to take on? Or I've thought, like, I'm not working for this guy ever again. And I'm like, I got to put bread on the table. I had a boss who told me that he only hires married men with kids. Because you got to have at least a kid. You got to. Because the more kids you have, the better. So the reason is this. If you tell a guy, hey, look, all right, it's raining outside. There's a ditch. We got to run 4-inch rigid, 10-foot sticks. I think that's about 160 pounds in that ditch that's filling full of water. And it's 36 degrees outside. Okay. And it's overtime. So you're getting time and a half to do it. He goes, the single guys go, forget this, I'm going home. The married guy goes, let me call my wife and tell her I'll be late. Yeah. You're just going to do what it takes.
Yeah. Like, and the single guy is more likely to be the one who stayed up drinking at the bar till 3 a.m. and doesn't show up to work the next day.
Yeah. I've worked with some of those. Yeah. I mean, or the married guy who, like, the wife is out of town. I'm like, oh, well, your wife's out. He's like, yeah, I just don't think I have it in me to stay up drinking anymore. You know, even though my wife is gone, I'll probably hang out with the dog and then go to sleep by 9 p.m. You know, it's like, it's that civilizing factor. Right. Like, you know, but you see this, like, you know, with kids that they make you move outside of yourself. They make you be a more selfless person. You know how many attics I've climbed through with just rat crap everywhere and insulation blowing everywhere, and I'm just like, look, I mean, I got to pay for the health insurance. Yeah. Or, you know, I got to put bread on the table. I got to make the mortgage. I'm just gonna do it.
You ever see that Simpsons episode where he tries to quit the factory?
He works for the bowling alley.
Yeah, his dream job. Yeah. He has to come back because of his kids, you know?
Yeah, and he has a sign that he covers with all that. Don't forget you're here forever.
Yeah.
And he covers up and says, do it for her.
Yeah. It's a sweet episode.
It is. So. The Simpsons used to be great. I haven't watched it yet.
Yeah, in the beginning. It was really
but it's also like, you know, I used to once in a while, I used to, you know, play, I love this video game called Age of Empires. That was great. And I haven't played the game since, I think my daughter was 6 months old. And you stop, you move away from it. You go, okay, you know, how can I monetize what I like doing so I can put bread on the table? You know, okay, I'm going to work out in the rain and the cold. you know how many jobs I did where it was just, I mean, it's 35 degrees outside in Seattle, 2 blocks from the water, and you're on the 35th floor, and there's no walls.
So you moved to Las Vegas.
Yeah, I mean, I've been out there digging out like holes to run conduit on the side of a house, and I'm like, whoa, all of a sudden scorpions come out. Whoa, okay, all right, keep working. You know, like these gloves are pretty thick, right? Like, yeah, and it's, 108 degrees out, and I look like a Viet Cong farmer with the big hat on, just, scorpions coming out of holes, and I'm holding, steel that's been laying in the sun, and it's super heavy, and yeah, it's slaving away for, whoever, but, slaving away for my family, but, having kids, having a wife, it makes you joyful. It gives meaning to those mundane jobs that you have. It gives happiness. It gives meaning to the truly crappy situations that you have to deal with, it because it gives purpose to them.
Right.
And I'm sure you've seen it in the guys who you confess in your parish, who they get married. Okay, they have kids. Mm-hmm. Your first 6 months of marriage is just arguing and then learning to resolve it. And then after that, you kind of like you're like two rocks that have tumbled against each other, and they've kind of.
I use that analogy all the time.
Yeah, you're not kind of smooth,
Right.
And then from there you have kids, and the struggle of having children and learning how to parent, and many women go through postpartum depression. It's very hard for them, and then being there for your wife, and that a lot of guys don't, when their kids are born, they don't really. I mean, what's amazing is how women just immediately know what to do when the kid is born.
Yeah, that instinct kicks in.
Yeah, they spring into action. Yeah. And you've probably seen this before, and that is the dad doesn't really know what to do, so he goes, I'm just going to provide. That's what I know how to do. Okay, I'll just provide as much as I can, right? And then as the kids get older, and men tend to bond with children through teaching them. Mm-hmm. And as they get older and they're more cognizant, you can teach them things. That's when males bond.
Well, in Ephesians 5, when it says the man is to nourish and cherish, the word for nourish is obviously to feed them. It's the word in Greek to feed. But for cherish is an actual unusual word that means to provide warmth. So it's to provide the safety of the home. Yeah. Really? Yeah. So we think wonderful. Of cherish in the English translation. We think of cherish
it's like sentimental feelings.
Yeah, it's not. It's like literally you are going to provide that safe place for them. They're going to. She has everything she needs. Right. She has all of her needs are met. And that is first and foremost, a man has an absolute duty toward that.
Yeah. And I see these guys, like out in Vegas, everyone has a job and then they have a second job because the home prices went up high and then, wages didn't. And, it's like you grab an Uber to head to the airport and the driver's telling you about, I got 4 hours of sleep last night and I have 2 kids. And, he looks at the fact that he's doing Uber with shame because his job as a bartender at, the Venetian doesn't cover everything. And I'm like, no, you're doing what you should.
Right.
Love doesn't pay bills. I mean, go take that to the utility district. We got a lot of love. They're like, yeah, we want our 112 this month, Yeah, and I've met too many guys who are just fine with letting their wife do the earning. And it's like, this is really a strain on the relationship, and she grows resentful of it. Right. Oh, my wife isn't like that. No, I guarantee your wife is like that. She's pulled away from her time with the child. Now she has to go earn because you won't. That's not to say there aren't situations. I mean, now it's increasingly difficult to have a single income home.
Right. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the
semi-impossible in a lot of areas.
Yeah. A lot of the feminist reaction, I think, was against a false standard of like the 1950s housewife, which
it wasn't realistic.
It wasn't real, and it was, and if you do try to live that lifestyle, it's very isolating, like a suburban lifestyle. It's
extremely sad. Yeah.
Yeah. Women in traditional settings, in old world settings and so forth, they lived in a village setting where the women were spending a lot of time together with their kids. They went and do their wash together. They went to.
They were helping with the harvest.
Yeah, helping each other do things.
They felt productive.
Yeah, they were in those social relationships that they're designed for were always being met, right?
Yeah.
With other women with kids.
Yeah.
And yeah, when you stick a bunch of women who don't know each other in very different cultures, sometimes in the suburbs, and they're all in their little cubicles, like houses, are like standing aside, apart from one another. that is very like that's a very kind of depressing existence. And I think that you take away all the duties by giving the most time-saving devices possible. What is that going to create? It's going to create sort of a bitterness that leads to kind of reaction against, like, oh, the men get to go and do productive things and interact while we're trapped in the house with soap operas.
Well, it's also that a lot of these women had worked in the factories during the Second World War. They'd made money. Yeah. They felt like a purpose. And one thing is that, in my view, the most important job in society is the rearing of new citizens. And that's what mothers do, right?
That's the only thing that perpetuates a society.
Yeah, I mean, that's the most important job, right? And, again, I'm very blessed with a wife who's very good. She reads the Bible to the children every night. She prays with them. The children are always clean. The house is always clean. She's a fantastic cook. The meals are always prepared. She takes amazing care of all of us. Phenomenal. She's a much better wife than I deserve. And, and she also puts up with my shenanigans, which there's a lot of. I got kind of a difficult person. Well, I'm a very difficult person. But, the most important job in society is the rearing of new citizens. And that's what women do. Your first 7 years of your life, the most important person in your life is your mom.
Yeah, that's why our language is called our mother tongue.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. I mean, like I said, my piety or my mother was very pious, and I go to church every Sunday. It's no question where we will be or where we are. We're going to church that weekend. And I'm always there unless I'm very ill, or I'm on a flight or something. I'm there. And I got that from my mother. The fact that I can have conversations, I got that from my mother. Your mother socializes you. The sense of morality I received from my mother. I saw my father, acted out through, like, hey, you paid me too much. Here's the money. And instead, that's the most important job in society, and that's what a mother does. And instead we've psyoped women into thinking that instead of having the most important job in society, bringing new life into the world and raising and really moving society forward through properly rearing citizens, that instead they should go get some corporate hellhole job where they have meetings about meetings to plan for the next meeting. Jobs that are being absolutely wiped out by AI because they're meaningless. Just move it from one spreadsheet to another, and let's have a meeting about how you moved it from one spreadsheet to another. Let's have some 80, like 100-slide PowerPoint about our new HR policy.
Yeah, or the meaning of leadership or something.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a tweet that was absolutely hilarious. It said right now there are 24-year-old women ovulating who are stuck in an office watching an 80-slide PowerPoint on global warming. I mean, like right there, that's the perfect. Have children, get married. Produce that. That's the most meaningful work right there. And in a real way, mothers, they have their own, I guess you could say, their own priesthood in a way. And that is, they raise this child up and they offer this child to society. That's the sacrifice that they give, that they present this child whom they've raised, to society for the improvement of society.
Right.
For the perpetuation of a good society.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And that's I guess you could say the priesthood of mothers. The priesthood of women would be that they have a child, that they offer this child, they rear them.
Oh, St. Paul says the woman will be saved through childbearing. I mean, what else can it mean except that that's such an important aspect of society that that it's a source of salvation. The way it's done. If you do it properly, right? You do it in a godly way, it's a source of salvation.
There you go. And so. It's just so sad to me that, and I regularly, I interact with a lot of people through work. And when I find people who are elderly, who are in horrible health, as long as they have kids who they talk to and their kids live near them, these are joyful people.
True.
One lady I know, she has macular degeneration, so she can't see through the center of her eye. She only has peripheral vision. She was widowed 30 years ago. She's 90. She has a walker. Okay. Every time I go over to do work at her house, her daughter is there. Her daughter lives a mile away. Okay. Daughters are at least once a day, sometimes several. Okay. Her other daughter lives a few miles away. She comes and visits. The grandchildren are in and out. Her sons do what sons do, Hey, thanks for raising me. Bye. The daughters, of course, stay close. They take care of their parents, right? So the sons fly in, every couple months, see her. The lady's very happy. I work with some people who they have no children, great health, all the amenities. They've had phenomenal life experiences, and there's an emptiness.
Yeah.
And the people whom I meet who are in the absolute worst situation are not the people who never got married, they're single, and they're 75. Those people have slowly gotten used to the fact that they'll die alone. It's the people who got married and never had kids, because they just know that one day they're going to wake up and the only person they have in the world is going to be dead.
The dink, the dual income, no kids.
Worst situation. Absolutely worst. It's really horrible.
Yeah. Well, there's been there are quite a few suicides that come out of that, because if you think about,
really?
It's a very sad situation where you lose the only person you really cared about, and the surviving spouse just doesn't want to live anymore, and it's a very sad, way to go. But that's becoming,
that makes sense.
That's something that I as a priest I've seen it happen twice.
Wow.
Yeah. But so it's not uncommon. It's like, you have, you've put everything, you put all your eggs in that basket, and now it's been taken away from you.
Absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It's the other thing is that so many people, all they really need is a nudge to do what nature told them to do. And it's actually on a few occasions. I've met these people who, they're 31, 32, they don't have kids, they're a married couple. And I go, why don't you have kids? Oh, it's just, it doesn't feel right. And I go, oh, these are pictures of my kids. I tell them stories of my kids. I go, look, I just tell you about the most happy people. I tell them what I just told you. I see them about a year later and the wife is 7 months pregnant. People just need a nudge to do what they should do. Mm-hmm. That's all they really need. Yeah. They need encouragement. And women especially have been psyoped into this view that you should go into some corporate hellhole job and have meetings about the meeting where you talk about another meeting.
I was in the corporate world. It is hell, and I don't know why anyone would purposely choose that. Yeah,
the most important job in society or the fourth meeting of the day. I'm not doing it.
So, well, thank you for coming on. I think
it's been a pleasure. It's been an absolute honor to come on.
Yeah,
I thoroughly enjoyed it.
This was fun. Thank you for making the stop in Miami here.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
And anytime you're around, or maybe next time I'll be there.
I'd be honored. I'd be completely honored if you.
Like I said, I've never been there, and it can show me an appropriately. Priestly appropriate good time. Okay. We'll go out to Red Rock Canyon. That's a beautiful national park. I love to see nature.
Yeah, and you can stop at Mount Zion on the way in. It's outside St. George, Utah. Okay. That's a good one. And the Grand Canyon isn't too far from there.
I've been once to the Grand Canyon, but I only stayed there for one day as we're passing through, driving to LA. One time.
There's a lot of beautiful things to see in the area. A lot of beautiful natural parks. Yeah.
Sounds like a plan.
Excellent.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much, Father. Thank you.
Apostolic Tradition is an evangelical ministry of Christ the Savior Orthodox Cathedral located in Miami, Florida. You can find the cathedral on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at the links in the description below. If you would like to support the cathedral and this channel financially, please visit us at orthodoxmiami.org/give to make a donation. And if you enjoy this content, please make sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. Glory to God for all things.